Hello everyone, this is Chase Pounds. Welcome to my channel. This was a subject I wasn't planning on discussing about, but since we're heading the fall anyway, and it kind of coincides with paranormal topics, I'm going to be discussing about UFOs, about my opinions about UFOs. Now, I kind of did a video about this in my earlier videos about the 1896 UFO crash, 1897 UFO crash, and recently I kind of found myself going back to the subject. It was mainly because of a couple of weeks back I had watched a documentary with my uncle about it was a documentary on Tubi called 75 Years of Roswell, and it was a pretty interesting documentary, and I would say that it kind of renewed my interest in the subject of UFOs, though typically I've seen other UFO documentaries before, and lately I wasn't that into the subject. I found it kind of I guess a dull topic at one point, but late, which at one point when I was in actually when I was in grade school, no, middle school, I was kind of found myself going through a phase where I was into studying, kind of had like a good knowledge of UFOs, mainly because I was doing a report, a different class on the subject of UFOs, a writing class I think it was, and I didn't get like UFO subjects from ancient times to about World War II. Though I did not have no knowledge of the UFO crash of 1897. It was just actually that year, right when I was doing this report around this month. I was doing a report, writing a report on UFOs. A special came on the History Channel about the 1897 UFO crash. I was not familiar with it, and I regret not adding it to my report, my assignment. But particularly this documentary I was watching called 75 Years of Roswell, I and I kind of noticed this in many documentaries, and I kind of mentioned this before in my channel. I mean in my earlier video, that the 1897 Aurora crash, UFO crash, doesn't get the same amount of attention as the Roswell. There are only just a handful of is a few documentaries that exist, mainly on the History Channel, but not on the but on the 1896 Roswell crash, but not too many on the on the Aurora crashes. Like I said, a few documentaries out there, and it's articles on Reddit, but still it doesn't get the same amount of attention. Usually, all documentaries that exist, typically that usually just talk about the Roswell incident in later cases up to today, but not the Aurora case, or cases during the turn of the century, known as the Great Airship Mystery. Interestingly, and I find this kind of significant because this was before there was even a concept of UFOs, and I don't place a lot of UFO cases during the 19th century. Like I said, usually they just start off from sometimes to talk about ancient times, which in this documentary I watched on 75 Years of Roswell, it didn't even, nor did it mention the earlier cases going back to the war. It just talks about Roswell. It doesn't even mention that there was earlier signs of Foo Fighter sightings during World War II. It only mentions it all started with Roswell, but though, like I said, there was no cases going back, cases, UFO cases going well before Roswell. It mentions nothing about the 1896, 97 airship wave of airship sightings in the Aurora, Texas crash, which is very similar to the Roswell, and sometimes known as the Texas Roswell. But and there's even a UFO expert who's from Texas, and she makes no references of this. I thought she was going to mention the Aurora case, but no, she didn't. And you also in the documentary makes a point that cases of UFO abduction is kind of in a different category of its own from UFO sightings, where it's kind of known as three kinds. There's the close encounter of the first kind, which is, I think, seeing like air lights in the sky, which are thought to be unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Now they're known as UPAs. I think the second class or second category is known as the second kind. I forget what's that known as. It's like injuries or close calls with a UFO, like maybe someone getting hurt or injured, maybe like cow mutilation, I guess, which you have that going back to the 19th century as well. During the 1896 craze, UFO sighting craze. Then you you have the like third wave, the third stage's classification of a UFO sighting is the sightings of not occupants in the ship or around or close by, just seeing like a being, a humanoid, extraterrestrial, whatever it may be, whatever it may be of that. Then the fourth stage is abduction, actually being kidnapped or abducted. I think that's some of the stages of UFO encounters. And inductions are usually someone that's been who who's either been kidnapped or who's been known to have vanished for long periods of time due to a UFO sighting. And oftentimes they report going into the craft itself. A lot of times they report, of course, seeing the humanoid beings, the extraterrestrials, sometimes known as the Greys, and they often report being, I guess in a way, being conducted on experiments or in one way or another, like surgery or implants of some sort. And as I said, they lose track of time and they feel a sense of weightlessness, motionless, where they helpless, where they can't move. And like in a state, maybe like a trance-like state, like of some sort, maybe perhaps. And my knowledge of the first earliest in the documentary mentions that there was a gap in years between after the first report of a UFO crash and before the first story of an abduction, which there's a decade, because Roswell happened in 1947, and the first UFO abduction case was in late 1957, 58, 59. I think it was known as the Travis Avertis case in Brazil. Was the first publicized case, but the first United States case in the U.S. of a UFO abduction is the Betty and Barney Hill case in 1960, 1961, and they're known as the first UFO abduction case, which case, and I find interesting itself that there was was a gap when the first UFO crash took place, but yet there's a gap, and it took a while for the alien abductions to take place. I find it interesting. Though come to find out, I also wondered that were they in the earlier cases before these two cases going back during the turn of the century, during the wave of the UFO, the mass UFO sightings. Wave of the UFO sightings in 1896, 97. Sure enough, doing some browsing, it does exist. It does exist, and there was a case of a man in Stockton, California. Most of these reports of airships were all over California, and California, and California, of a man named, I forget his name. It was where, but he reported that a humanoid being stopped him at his car. He had like a buggy, and some beings came up to him, and they made like a funny noise, he claims, and they tried with force to try to take him out of his car, but realized that they overpowered him. They overpowered him. They gave up and just boarded back into the spacecraft, and they took off. And he quickly in his buggy scurried away from the craft. But some look at this as almost an attempt of abduction, even though there was no actual abduction. So it really wasn't a actual case of alien abduction, but abduction. And though there were some other cases in the 50s prior to the Betty and Barney Hill case of some people who claimed to have disappeared, to have vanished and were abducted when investigating these UFOs, these flying saucers. But it was one of the things I always wondered, were there any earlier cases of abduction, just like there was an early case of UFO crash in the Aurora, Texas, and it made me think about other cases of famous people that went missing, such as there was, an explorer by the name of Percy Fawcett. That went missing, I don't know what year, sometime during the 19th century. Then you had the famous Amelia Earhart, who went missing in 1937 during a world record flight. And her body's never been found. And this actually, it was on the news that they mentioned that there was a team, a Purdue team, which was the school that the school that Amelia here, which was the university Amelia Earhart taught at Purdue University. A team was setting out to explore supposed islands of the South Pacific, or supposedly where it was reported that Amelia Earhart was last seen and spotted in cases of her plane being spotted. But it always been a mystery what happened to Amelia Earhart. Then you also have the case of Flight 19 in 1945 that disappeared and supposedly will become known as the Bermuda Triangle area. And this was 2 years just before Roswell. It was kind of prophetic. People were making claims that as if they vanished off the face of the earth and went to Mars. Though not specifically saying that it was a UFO that they were abducted by UFOs or aliens, but just hinting that when they say vanished off the face of the earth, went to Mars, kind of hinting at that possibility. But again, this was all before there was even the concept of UFOs, which I kind of find kind of interesting. And again, going back to the 1896, 97 cases, which is which I then again find very significant, because this was a time before UFOs were even considered a established concept, a saying, a phrase of the modern vocabulary. And the only thing I could think of, there was not even any science fiction wasn't really even a prevalent genre during this period. The only thing I could think of this period that I associate with science fiction is H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells, particularly War of the Worlds, which was mostly probably a short story at this point. So that's my take on it. I find these cases kind of interesting. These turn of the century cases interesting, and there aren't that many that get really touched upon. Usually, like I said, they talk about cases going back to ancient times, during the medieval times with the Renaissance paintings, and they skip much. There's a gap in events between the 1700s, the 19th century, 1900s, which there were another. Which comes to find out as well, there were some more sightings between 1912 and 1913. None during the Roaring Twenties, none during the Depression, which also come to find out there was an Italian UFO sighting of a UFO crash in 1933 with humanoid bodies, I think. Which I also came across on Reddit. I never just really read it. Got to read this article. But it just shows you how that really there are a lot of sightings of UFOs, early UFOs, but yet they get little, I guess, as much attention compared to Roswell. Again, people always think it's Roswell, but that wasn't so much the case of the first UFOs. When the UFOs just started, it was like a post-World War II Cold War thing. That wasn't so much the case. But it's just an interesting thing to subject to talk about. And that's all I got to say. This wasn't a planned subject I want to talk about. My next video, I do plan on discussing reviewing the movie When Time Ran Out. I've been meaning to discuss this movie. So hopefully it'll be my next video. And so forth. This is another video by Chase Pounds. Stay tuned for my next video. Hello again, this is Chase Pounds. Here's some of the videos, some of the pictures I was trying to show you. My camera wasn't all that focused. the pictures of airships in the newspaper. These are supposedly what the airships look like, cigar-like objects. Not only thought to be maybe like advanced weapons, military weapons. It was, of course, it was on the eve of the Spanish-American Wars too. They never really been solved to this day. And a lot of the airships were even to this day, the speed they go do not match with even the aircraft we have today. Even for back then, so it's kind of a mystery for both if you're trying to analyze them in different time periods. And these were sightings all over the U.S. and there's even sightings in the U.K. as well. And even around my hometown area, St. Louis, Missouri, there were people. They had their own share of these wave of sightings. The most infamous, as I said, was the one in Aurora, Texas, in 1897, where a UFO crashed into a windmill supposedly, and a bunch of debris was found in an alien body. It was supposedly buried in a cemetery and was much of the whales and much of the debris was thrown down the whale. To this day, people are split in the town. If it exists, that it happened. Many think it's a hoax. Some people think it's truth to it. I kind of think there's something to this case because several things. They found the head marker of where the alien body was found. The debris was found in the whale, and there's a couple of accounts that consistent accounts of the crash taking place that year when it happened, and people were acting suspicious of it too. So that's my take on this case of the airship mystery. Again, it's my favorite UFO story I'd like to bring up because it's very significant because of the time period, because there was the era when UFOs crashes weren't that UFO cases are common. You don't typically place that during like the Victorian times, the frontier period. I find it very significant, and it being my favorite time period, historic time period as well. That's all I have to say again on the subject. This is another video by Chase Powell. Stay tuned for my next video.